I was like, I was Shisma. I left work, but I'm driving.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدريك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى أما من استغنى فأنت له تصدى وما عليك ألا يزكى وأما من جاءك يسعى وهو يخشى فأنت عنه تلهى كلا إنها تذكرة فمن شاء ذكره في صحف مكرمة مرفوعة مطهرة بأيدي سفرة كرام بررة قتل الإنسان ما أكفره من أي شيء خلقه من نطفة خلقه فقدره ثم السبيل يسره ثم أماته فأقبره ثم إذا شاء أنشره كلا لما يقضي ما أمره فلينظر الإنسان إلى طعامه أنا صببنا الماء صبا ثم شققنا الأرض شقا فأنبتنا فيها حبا وعنبا وقضبا وزيتونا ونخلا وحدائق غلبا وفاكهة وأبا متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الصاخة يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه ووجوه يومئذ مسفرة ضاحكة مستبشرة ووجوه يومئذ عليها غبرة ترهقها قترة أولئك هم الكفرة الفجرة صدق الله العظيم رسول الكريم. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Please, before we start, please with a loud salawat. Thank you guys for joining us these Muharram lecture series presented by Al-Hussain Youth. Al-Hussain Youth has been founded by individuals who have a far vision of creating a youth group to get the youth in the community to come together, play together, learn together in an Islamic environment. Al-Hussain has hosted many event training programs, to name a few, such as public speaking, career training, fun activities, and volunteering. Al-Hussain Youth till today continues to grow and expand in different ways. Al-Hussain is about training, coaching, and mentoring, and to bring out the best in our youth. They become better leaders and have strong confidence in themselves. Please note that the lectures are available after the end of the program on our YouTube channel. Now our speaker today, Sheikh Ahmed Bazi, is a 5th-year student at Imam Hussain Foundation in Windsor, which is accredited by the Maraja of Najaf and Qom. He thoroughly studies jurisprudence, logic, theology, Arabic grammar, and more, and is a lecturer and reciter for 4 years and has traveled internationally to speak and recite. He is a teacher in pre-Hawza for youth groups in Windsor, where in-depth jurisprudence and theology is taught. He has studied mechanical engineering at St. Clair College. And without further ado, please welcome Sheikh Ahmed Bazi with a loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم يا كريم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Just before we begin, I would like to say thank you so much for having me. May Allah bless you and help you all. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who truly benefit from Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam in these nights, from Abu Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam, from Ashura as a whole. And we will do so with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Before we begin, I just would like to say that with us is also another community from Montreal, Bridges Foundation from Montreal. So it's going to be a joint program, inshallah, between our brothers in Toronto, Imam Hussain Youth in Toronto, and Bridges Association in Montreal. So if you guys see me fiddling a little bit with the setup, it's quite an elaborate setup actually. So please do forgive me. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah bless you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa hashir. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا حبيب الله صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. For the love of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, let's have a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. For the love of Sayyid al-Zahra alayhi salam, let's have another one, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And lastly, for the love of Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, let's have a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad to begin these majalis. Allahumma salli ala. To begin the majalis of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, a person can say many things, begin with many different topics, but inshallah we are going to begin with this. When it comes to a person's identity and who they are, and when we come to study the identity of a human being, we come to realize that different human beings identify with different things. And different human beings build their identity, build who they are as a person from different things around them. And those things, usually the things that build the identity of the human being, are not things found inside the human being. They're not internal. Rather, most of the time they are external factors, external variables that build the human's identity and ultimately make the human being who they are. And different people adhere to different things. For a religious person, their religious beliefs make up who they are and build their identity. For a person who doesn't really believe in religion or doesn't feel that religion plays a huge role in their life, it would be their life experiences. For someone else, it would be their education. Each and every person adheres to something, holds on to something, and that thing, or a multitude of different things, make up who they ultimately are and who they're going to be in the future. When it comes to us, my brothers and sisters, we are of the first type, the religious bunch or the religious group. And ultimately, a huge portion of who we are and our identity is made up of the ideas or the religious beliefs that we have. And so you find that if you took a Shi'i or a Muslim and put him beside or put her beside another Muslim, yes, they're going to be unique in different ways, but they're going to have a lot of similarities in what they believe and how they act and how they hold themselves, or just the simple aspects of their personality and character would be very similar because they adhere to one idea and one ideology, and that ultimately makes up who they are. When it comes to the Shi'i, the lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, you find that the similarities are even more. Why? Because the ideas that they hold are of one type, because they adhere to the same group or sect. And you find one common thing amongst religious people. You find that religious people take their identity not just from the religious beliefs at their core. Rather, they find a character, a person in that religious idea that they have, in the religion itself, And you find that they emulate and mirror that person. So they find one person, one individual that embodies their religious beliefs for them and mirror that person. And that person ends up building their identity for them. And so you find a Jewish person, a Jew, will look towards Moses, will look towards Nabi Sulaiman, for example, and mirror that personality. When you want to ask who embodies, for example, Christianity, the answer is Jesus Christ. And so you find that Jesus Christ is in one way or another Christianity. And so for someone to adhere to the Christian beliefs and build their identity through the Christian beliefs, they should mirror Jesus Christ. When it comes to Islam, and specifically Shia Islam, you find that the Shia adheres to many different personalities. But one personality every lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam resonates with is a man by the name of Hussain ibn Ali al-Hussain. And so you find that human beings are affected by Imam al-Hussain, and specifically the believers in his imamate, the Shi'i, the lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, so much that he tries or she tries to emulate that individual as much as possible. And so you find that Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam affects the way you think. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam affects the way you understand. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam has an effect on your emotions. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam has an effect on the way you act. I'll give you an example. Very simply. Right now you are in a majlis or you are watching a lecture. You could be playing a video game or on Netflix right now. But the belief of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam stops you from doing these things that you want to do and doing something else that somebody else would not do. And that is sit in front of a computer screen and listen to a lecture, or get in your car and go to the masjid for a lecture. He has a profound effect on the way you act. Like the way you think before you get that job, you think to yourself, I have 2 weeks of vacation. Yes? Those 2 weeks of vacation, I'm going to set them aside for Arba'een. When does Arba'een come? It's in October or so, at that time. So those 2 weeks are going to be for Arba'een. The Imam alayhi salam now is affecting the way that you think. The emotional aspect. When you drink water, the first thing you say is, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. And the heart cries and the eye sheds a tear for Imam al-Hussain. He affected you emotionally. So you find that the lover of Ahlul Bayt, the Shi'i, his or her personality is directly related and ingrained in it is the name Hussain, Jamil. So if Hussain gives us the identity that we have, and our identity is the Hussaini identity, I have a question. How much of the character of Imam al-Hussain do we know? The character of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to say, and I'll show you exactly what I'm trying to say. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam lived for 54 years. 54 years. Imam al-Hussain's revolution began about 1 year, maybe you can argue even a few months before Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam ultimately was in Karbala. Maybe a year to a few months. Jamil. Let's say a few months. طيب. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam's interactions with Muawiyah and the discussions that he was having with Muawiyah were for years. If you know about Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam's history and the history before Ashura, then you understand the last 4, 5, maybe 10 years of the life of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Let's say you know that the last 10 years, the imamate of Imam al-Hussain, which lasted about 10 or 11 years. You know about that. Like, what about the 44 years that Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam lived? If this character that I'm trying to emulate is what gives me my identity and builds my identity, how do I really build my identity through this person? And I only know maybe the last 10 days that he lived, or I only know about the last 10 days that he lived, or the year that he lived, the last year that he lived, or the last 10 years of a lifespan that lasted for 54 years. For us to truly have Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam in our hearts and build the identity that we have, for us to emulate and mirror Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, it's not enough just to know what happened to him on the day of Ashura. or what happened to him for the last 10 days that he was in Karbala, or for the last 3 months that he was going back and forth with Yazid ibn Muawiyah, or the last 10 years that he was with Muawiyah and going back and forth with him. Rather, to understand Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam's message and allow that to play a role in building who I am, I must understand who Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam was for the last 44 years. Imam al-Hussain lived 7 years with Rasulullah, 35 years with Amir al-Mu'mineen, and 44 years with Imam al-Hassan. Those years, what do I know about Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam? Who was Imam al-Hussain for those 44 years? That's the question that we're going to try and answer today, inshallah ta'ala. I will tell you the characteristic that defines Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam for those 44 plus 10, 54 years. If you give me a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The riwayah says this. Listen to the riwayah. It says, Sayyid al-Zahra alayhi salam brings young Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussain to Rasulullah on his deathbed. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is about to pass away. And so Sayyid al-Zahra brings Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussain to Rasulullah and says to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, you're leaving this world. Give my 2 children some of your inheritance. Give them something to inherit you by or inherit you with. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Amma al-Hasan. As for al-Hasan, فَلَهُ هَيْبَتِي وَسُؤْدَدِي. He has my magnificence and my dominance. And I'll explain what those mean. وَأَمَّا الْحُسَيْنِ فَلَهُ جُرْأَتِي وَجُودِي. And as for al-Hussain, he has my courage, jur'ati, boldness, wajudi. And we'll get to what jud means in a bit. As for al-Hasan, he has my dominance and my magnificence. What is he trying to say? I'll explain to you what he's trying to say. Have you ever been in a place, in a hall, in a masjid, somewhere, wherever it was, and there's a group of people there, and then all of a sudden, a person walks into the room. And right when that person walks into the room, everything stops, and everyone looks at that person. The person's not doing anything weird. The person's not saying anything. He's just walking into the room like a normal person. But right when this person walks into the room, everything stops for this person, and everyone looks at him and notices him or her arrival. That person has an aura of dominance. That person has a magnificence to him or her in which he captivates the people and is able to captivate not just the people and the hearts of the people, the attention of the people. And usually, the people of high status in that community or in the community itself, the community in question, have this aura to them, this dominance about them. This dominance. This is what we call al-hayba. This is what we call as-su'da, where they have a high status, and that high status is so charismatic, it gives off an aura of dominance. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam had this quality. It said, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, if he came outside of his house in Medina and sat in front of his house, nobody would come in front of Imam al-Hassan. The street would stop. Yani the horses, the people would not walk in front of Imam al-Hassan. Essentially, if he sat in front of his doorstep, he closed down the street. And they did this out of respect for Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. Imam al-Hassan had that aura about him. He had that magnificence, that honorable aura that dominated over the people. This is al-Hassan alayhi salam. Jameel. As for al-Hussain, jur'ati wajudi. As for al-Hussain, I have given him my courage and my boldness. This is jur'ati. Wajudi. Like when you go and take this word al-jud and you put it into the translations, or you try and translate it, it gives you generosity. That's not accurate, because generosity is also karam. So we ask the question, what's the difference between al-jud and al-karam? Please stay with me. Please stay with me. And before we define and we find the difference between the two, I want to say this in brackets. For those that are more academically inclined, in Hausa, whenever we look at a religious term that we find in the Hadith or in the Quran, we always look at the term linguistically first, and then we take that term that's used that we now know the linguistic understanding of it, the actual definition of it linguistically, and then we derive a religious idea from that term. Then we derive a religious idea from that term. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says what? That we brought down the Quran in an Arabic language so that they may understand. So the Quran and the Hadith are in Arabic. Analyze them linguistically and then derive from the linguistic term a religious term. So we're going to do the same thing. We ask, linguistically speaking, what's the difference between al-karam and al-jud? The ulama of the Arabic language, scholars of the Arabic language, they say, al-karam is when a person gives someone something after that person asked them, and when that person deserves that thing. Mathalan, you come to me and you say, Ahmed, can you give me your laptop? You ask for the laptop and I give you the laptop. Why did I give you the laptop? Number one, you asked. Number two, I broke your laptop yesterday. So it makes sense for me to give you my laptop because you deserve it. This is al-karam. Then you have one that's above al-karam. It's called al-jud. What's al-jud? Al-jud is when you give someone something and they didn't ask, they don't deserve it. And that's why they say al-jud bil-asl, the word al-jud in the Arabic language, before we got this meaning for it, they said al-jud huwa al-matarul ghariz. Al-jud is the rain that comes down and pours and soaks you. Why did they connect the two? It's as if it's the Arabic language is telling us. I use the word jud here for rain, and we also used it for generosity, because when rain pours, it falls on the one who deserves the blessing and the one who doesn't deserve the blessing. Similarly, al-jud is when you give someone who deserves and who doesn't deserve. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam in his life was known to exhibit al-jud to perfection. Why did he exhibit that quality? Because it was given to him by Rasulullah himself. And here I want you to pay attention. Also, for those who are academically inclined, listen here for a second. I want to tell you something. Mafhum al-jud, the idea or the meaning of al-jud, the generosity of a human being, is what we call al-mafhum al-mushakkik. What's al-mafhum al-mushakkik? Al-mafhum al-mushakkik is an idea, is a term that comes in varying degrees. So someone can have more jud, more generosity, be more generous than someone else. And so we say the jud of Imam al-Hussain, the karam, the generosity of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Why did it define him? Why did it define him? Because it stemmed from the quality that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam held. And we say that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was given that quality by none other than Al-Jawad Al-Kareem, Rabbul Alameen, when he said, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have the highest and most sublime morals. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying it. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, we've given you this quality. And notice the words of Rasulullah in the hadith. What did he say? He didn't say, and I have given Hussain al-jud. He didn't say, I gave Hussain generosity. He said, I have given Hussain my generosity, judi. So Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam is defined by the generosity of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises in the Quran. That's why in the life of Imam al-Hussain, the Imam alayhi salam was known for his karam, was known to give even those that years before were in one way or another against him. Yes, against him. It said the Imam alayhi salam in the middle of the night would go around to the different houses of Medina, giving them food and money to the poor, giving them food and money to the point where it was seen on the body of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And in Medina, not everybody was with Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Not everybody was a Shia. Not everybody was a lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. طيب, aside from this, Sheikh Baqir Sharif al-Qarashi, he narrates a hadith. He says, Usama bin Zayd was on his deathbed. Usama bin Zayd was on his deathbed. Who's Usama bin Zayd? Usama bin Zayd was one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he points out that Usama bin Zayd, when Imam Ali alayhi salam was fighting for the Khilafah, when the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen was taken away from him, did Usama bin Zayd stand with Amir al-Mu'mineen? No. Usama bin Zayd did not stand with Imam Ali, nor did he defend Imam Ali when he was fighting for the Khilafah itself. The Khilafah of Rasulullah, he didn't stand with him. But when Usama ibn Zayd was on his deathbed, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam was sitting over him. Usama, he looks up and he says, oh my sorrow, I'm going to die with the sorrow in my heart. The Imam alayhi salam looks at him and he says, why? What's going on? Why do you have sorrow in your heart before you die? Usama looked at him and he said, I have a debt. Like, what's that debt? I have 60,000 dirhams that I have to pay off. And back then, 60,000 dirhams was a lot. The Imam alayhi salam said, don't worry, we'll pay it for you. Usama said, I fear that I'm going to die before I pay it off. The Imam alayhi salam gets up and pays it for him. And this was a person that wasn't in support. Yani, did he deserve? No, absolutely didn't deserve. But the Imam alayhi salam still gave him. Another instance that's narrated by historians. It said a man comes to Medina. He enters Masjid Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who was in the masjid? 3 people. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam in one corner. Ibn al-Zubayr, Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, and Utbah ibn Abi Sufyan, who was the brother of Muawiyah himself. These 3 were in the masjid. The Bedouin man comes in and he first goes to Utbah ibn Abi Sufyan. He goes to him and he says, I've killed my cousin. I killed my cousin and I have to pay the blood money and I don't have the money. I need you to give me the money. He's asking for the money. Utbah looks at one of his servants and says, give him 100 dirhams. Give him 100 dirhams, let him go. The man said, I'm not going to take a piece of it. I'm coming to take the entire amount. Utbah essentially rejects him. The man goes to Abdullah ibn Zubayr, says to him, I killed my cousin and I need the blood money. Abdullah ibn Zubayr looks at his servant and says, give him 200. The man said, I came for the full amount. I'm not going to leave without it. Abdullah ibn Zubayr rejects him. He goes to Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. He tells him, I killed my cousin and I need the blood money. The Imam alayhi salam looks at one of his servants and says, give him 10,000 dirhams. And on top of that, give him another 10,000 dirhams. طيب. The Bedouin man, he looks at Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam and says, the 10,000 dirhams I'm going to use for the blood money. Like the other 10,000, what's it for? The Imam alayhi salam says, the 10,000 that I've given you, the extra 10,000 is for you to spend on your family, for you to live a better life. Did he deserve that money? The guy just killed his cousin. The man who killed his cousin was coming and asking the Imam for money. The Imam alayhi salam not only gives him the blood money, he gives him extra. The man, when he takes the money, he says these couplets of poetry. Look what he says. He says, neither any fragrance reached me, nor was I involved in a love relationship or a loving relationship, yet I became enchanted. For the progeny of the messenger, I came and recited these couplets of poetry. For they are the noble, exalted beings that the stars of the heavens twinkle for. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi. These are merely instances. And if I want to come and tell you of all of the instances, the full 10 days are not going to be enough. But can I tell you the best instance where Imam al-Hussein's generosity is on full display for me and you? Let me tell you. It's when Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam took his family to some desert in the middle of Iraq and posted his tents in a place that he knew he would be buried, it took a stand on that day and sacrificed everything that he had for the message that he held. You tell me, Ahmed, that's not generosity, that's sacrifice. I'll tell you, there's levels of generosity. There's one person who gives when he's asked, but gives away something that they don't care for. There's another person who gives when they're not asked, but what they give is something that they also don't care for. But then there's one who gives when they're not asked, and they give what is dearest to them. And that is the meaning of sacrifice. That is the meaning of sacrifice. My brothers and sisters, I think we look at Karbala and Ashura in a very, very tunnel vision, very, very tight, very, very tunnel vision way, where we don't understand the full aspect or the full reality behind Karbala. But if we start to look at Karbala and Ashura through the scope of generosity, through the lens of generosity, and understand Karbala, Ashura, the sacrifice through the context of the generosity of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, we start to understand that Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam was not presenting himself, he was giving himself. And ultimately, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam gave us something. What did he give me and you? What did we receive from Imam al-Hussain? What was the gift that Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam gave me and you through the blood of his neck? It was you. It was you. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam gave you. He gave you who you are. He gave you the identity that you hold. He made you. When we start to understand Imam al-Hussain as the generous giver, then we understand that to something that is given, there has to be someone receiving that thing. Imam al-Hussain is the giver, and I am the receiver. I am the one who accepts. When I start to see Karbala and Ashura as something that I can take and accept from, that's when I'll allow Ashura and Karbala to affect me as a man or as a woman or as an individual. So Ashura, Karbala is not merely a tradition where I sit in front of a computer screen in this case, or in a majlis. I listen to a majlis, I listen to someone who entertains me for 45 minutes, and then I walk out like nothing happened. If I understand Ashura as merely something that's tradition, a sacrifice that was made, that we remember, as opposed to it being something that was given to us. Something that was given to us. And we must take it and hold it dear to our hearts. When I start to understand it in that manner, I've truly understood Ashura and Karbala. Why? Because whenever the generous gives, it's very customary. It's a custom that the person who receives thanks. If I gave you something precious, you don't just take it and walk away. You thank that person. When I start to understand Imam al-Hussain as the generous one, then I will understand that I have to give back to Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. And how do I give back? Is it merely through crying and latum? Good that we do it. But the way I give back to Imam al-Hussain is when I step outside that majlis. How do I hold myself? Do I hold myself by the message of Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam? Do I hold myself by the criteria that Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam held himself by? That's how I give back to Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. That's how I thank the Imam alayhi salam. Let's start understanding Karbala through the scope of generosity. For that's what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave us through Imam al-Hussain. It was that generosity. جودي وجرأتي صلى الله على محمد وآله. طيب, second, وجرأتي, my boldness. my boldness, my courage. And if I want to give you an example of the courage of Imam al-Hussain, and don't go past Ashura. Don't go past Karbala. Don't go past Karbala. And if you want to understand the level of jur'ah, the level of courage, boldness Imam al-Hussain had, then understand that it came from the bold Rasulullah that stood in front of the people of Mecca, the people of Arabia, and said, if the people put my hand, or if the sun was put in my right hand and the moon was put in my left hand, all for me to leave Islam and leave this message, I wouldn't have done so. And so Imam al-Hussain said his famous lines where he said, إن الدعي ابن الدعي قد ركز بين اثنتين بين السلة والذلة وهيهات من الذلة. This man has put us between two stances, two places, death or humiliation. وهيهات من الذلة, and far away from us is humiliation. That's boldness. That's courage. That's Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam. That's who we are here for. Jur'ati, boldness. Wajudi, generosity. And both of them are Karbala and Ashura. They both give us the full meaning of Ashura and Karbala. And so it's said on the day of Ashura, after Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam lost his brother Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, lost his 6-month-old child, Abdullah al-Radhi', lost Ali al-Akbar, lost al-Qasim, lost his best friend Habib ibn Mudahir, Muslim ibn Awsaja. The names, when you begin, you won't end. When he lost all of them, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam got himself ready for war. He put on his helmet. He put on his suit. He put on his armor. He got ready. He came down to the battlefield and said, أنا الحسين ابن الحسين أنا الحسين ابن علي أليت ألا أنثني. He said, I am Hussein, son of Ali. I'm the one coming down to the battlefield. I'm going to defend my family for this religion. And I'm going to defend this religion with my sword. The riwayat say the Imam alayhi salam would begin in the middle. He would sway to the left and destroy the left side of the army, would sway to the right and destroy the right side of the army, and come back to his place and say, Bismillahi wa billah. The riwayat say the enemies would look at Imam al-Hussain and they would say, we didn't see a man, we've never seen a man lose so much as Hussain ibn Ali, yet come down to the battlefield with such ferocity and courage. This is Hussain. This is Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam. But subhanallah, every courageous man, every courageous woman, when the cards are stacked against them, they're ultimately going to fall. We're human beings. Imam al-Hussain is a human being in the end. He's a human being. Ultimately, he fell. How did he fall, alayhi salam? Did he fall and have al-Abbas waiting to catch him? Did he fall and have Ali al-Akbar waiting to catch him? Did he fall and have his family and friends ready to help him up? No, he fell alone. He fell alone, alayhi salam, and had no one beside him. He fell alone. Laid on the plains of Karbala. The narrations say that the Imam alayhi salam was covered in wounds, covered with blood. He laid on the plains of Karbala in his own blood. He laid there for a while on the sand until he made a small pillow for his head on the plains of Karbala. Na'am, the narrations say that the Imam alayhi salam lay down on the plains of Karbala. The Imam made a cushion from sand to rest his head on. This made some of the enemies think that the Imam was tricking them and has a plot for them. So they said there's nothing wrong with Hussain. Some of them said he's weakened from his wounds, he can't stand. Others said the man isn't jealous. If you want to know his state, attack his camp. If you want to know if he's planning something on you, attack his woman. The men attacked the woman and frightened the children who came out. Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam came out calling for the Imam. She stood on the hill and said, Ya ibn ummi, Ya Hussain. She screamed, O son of my mother, Ya Hussain. Habibi, Ya Hussain. إن كنت حيا فأدركنا فهذه الخيل قد هجمت علينا. If you're alive, then help us come to our rescue. For the horsemen have attacked us, Ya Aba Abdullah. وإن كنت ميتا فأمرنا وأمرك إلى الله. And if you're dead, Ya Aba Abdullah, then we and you are to Allah. Our issue, our problem, our situation is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Imam heard his sister's voice, he stood up but fell on his face. Then he tried to stand up again but fell on his face for a second time. Then he stood up for a third time and fell on his face for a third time. And at this moment, he called out, Ya Shi'at al-Abi Sufyan, in lam yakun lakum din, وكنتم لا تخافون المعاد فكونوا أحرارا في دنياكم وارجعوا إلى أحسابكم إن كنتم عربا. O followers of Abi Sufyan's progeny, if you have no religion and you don't fear the day of judgment, then at least be free in this world and recall your ancestry. If you claim to be Arab, Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, he said, what are you trying to say, O son of Fatima? He said to them, I'm the one who's fighting you, and the women are not at fault. So as long as I am alive, forbid your men from harassing my woman. Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam was lying on the plains of Karbala until Shibr ibn al-Jawshan cried out, leave the man's women and attack him. The horses came at Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. They gathered around the Imam. Some were striking him with the sword, some were striking him with their spears, and others shooting him with arrows, and others throwing rocks at the Imam. Until some time passed, the sky became dark, and the clouds rained, blood, and the head of Abi Abdullah was raised to the sky. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Ya Allah, we ask you, Ya Allah, by the right of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, accept this majlis from us, Ya Allah. Accept our a'mal, Ya Allah. Accept our deeds, Ya Allah. Heal the sick, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Allow us to be from the supporters of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. Allow us to be from the supporters of Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman. All of us together, let's recite Dua al-Faraj. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلاتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والشهداء والعلماء before aloud salawat على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل.
Enlightening lecture. Thank you everyone for attending tonight's session, and make sure you tune in tomorrow evening at 9:30 p.m. We look forward to your attendance, and with that, tonight's session is ending, and see you guys tomorrow inshallah. Please leave the loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.